Welcome to Gardening in the Mountains, Garden Conifers and Evergreen. My name is Allison Arnold. I'm the Agriculture Extension Agent here in Buncombe County, and I'll be your host today. I'd like to welcome our speaker today, Bruce Appeldoorn. Bruce is a lifelong nurseryman and the owner of Appeldoorn Landscape Nursery located in the Golden Valley section of Rutherford County, North Carolina, and dedicated to high-quality conifers. Bruce has specialized in the production and use of needled evergreens for landscapes since 1975. He is also an active member and past president of the Southeastern region of the American Conifer Society. Appeldoorn Nursery currently produces over 750 varieties of conifers, all of which are propagated and produced on site, many of which are unavailable anywhere else, and all produced by cuttings or by grafting from plant material provided by some of the top gardens and arborvitae in the Southeast U.S. Bruce travels extensively in search of new offerings. In recent years, Bruce has been collecting and propagating new plant varieties from witches' brooms occurring in our local Southeast forest, a project now affiliated with the U.S. National Arboretum in Washington, D.C. Please take it away, Bruce.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking about conifers from all over the world. Conifers have been found on all the continents except Antarctica. And so they're a very widely distributed group of plants. So these are some of the characteristics of conifers in general. They are cone bearing, meaning that their seeds are wrapped up in a woody structure, protected from the elements. Cones can grow for more than just 1 year in some cases, like in cedars or firs. It's one of the oldest forms of reproduction in plants. They are wind pollinated, so they do not use insects for spreading their male portions transferred to female portions. It's all done by the wind. It may be done within the same tree, but usually it's best if the trees cross-pollinate. These are ancient trees. They have arisen long before flowering plants, dating back to the dinosaur age, many hundreds of millions of years back. These have been here a long time, and they tend to be tough, and they're good for problem areas. They're good survivors. They have long lives, and they are excellent landscape subjects. As far as culture, they mostly require sun, and they all require good drainage. So good drainage, if you're having a problem with a conifer, good drainage would be the first thing I would look at. See whether your soil is too wet or your plant is planted too low. The last item here, they can be evergreen or deciduous. We all know evergreen forms like junipers and firs, but we also have deciduous forms like bald cypress, dawn redwood, some of which will grow here and some of which won't. Conifers are very useful in the landscape. They're going to be used by nature and they're going to be used by gardeners. The first couple of things we've got here are nature use buffers. They can be great at visual, noise, and wind blockage. So if you're having a problem with a noisy neighbor, a good buffer is what you need. Wildlife shelter is very important. I'm sure that the animals and birds have used conifers over the eons for shelter. It's just amazing how many species of birds and the number of birds will have nesting at the nursery overnight or nesting for reproduction purposes. They're also great at forming a garden backbone. They are evergreen in this case. We'll talk about evergreens. They're being used as the bones of the garden. So it gives you a backdrop to show off your perennials, ground covers, and things like that. We've got ground cover forms. We've got all sorts of different textures and shapes to use. They blend very well. The more contrast you can use, the better. So your imagination using conifers is important and unrestrained. We've got all sorts of colors to use. And then there's a few more things that we can talk about. His garden in Holland that shows the use of many different types of shapes and forms. You can see all the way into the background. We've got some tall, thin, wispy types that move very nicely in the wind. We've got weeping forms. We've got small cone-like forms. Some are on a standard, or what the Europeans call a stem, and they're displayed at eye height to highlight a particularly showy conifer, for instance. Winter color is also very important in gardening, and conifers will provide that, and they will change. The plant in the backdrop here is a hemlock, which is green in June, but in December, this plant is bright gold, and it's one of the goldest plants on the nursery. It's going to stop at 20 feet. It's a smaller hemlock, but this is found 1950 or thereabouts, and it's a nice addition to any garden. And in the front, you've got a bright gold juniper variety that also stands out nicely. This is a yellow plant in the summertime, but it's golder in the wintertime. Bonsai is another use of conifers. Some of the bonsai specimens at the National Arboretum are over 350 years old and still confined to a trough or a pot. This is a juniper grouping. The North Carolina Arboretum at Bent Creek has an excellent collection of junipers and other plants in bonsai style. And then we have the opposite, trough gardens, where these are miniature plants planted together in a miniature setting with perhaps some succulents or a dwarf willow, some other types that are very dwarf plants that will not interfere, but they're all living together in these tiny little troughs. Now, what are we going to use as the criteria for best conifers? We're going to be talking about 15 or so of the best conifers for Asheville. The criteria I've developed here are few pests and diseases. They're suitable to excel at 2,400 feet in elevation, which is the Swannanoa Valley. They are long-lived. They are of ease of culture. They're easy plants to grow. They have low maintenance, certainly in the smaller growers. These are plants that need very little in the way of pruning. Once they're established, they'll need very little in the way of water. These are plants that you can love in a hurry. Our group for the sun-loving conifers are shown in front of us here. Green giant arborvitae, Cedars or true cedars, Ginko, pines, Cunninghamia or China fir, juniper, bald cypress, and Alaskan cedar. All of these have members that are truly outstanding plants and truly stellar performers in our area. We'll go through these one by one. Green giant arborvitae shown in this picture at the bottom of Bald Fort Mountain. This is a screen of many plants planted at diagonal. They're spaced at about 15 to 20 feet apart. And this is hiding an old DOT mulch and gravel pile. Green giant is a little bit large. It's 75 feet in final size, smaller than white pine or hemlock for hedges, but it's still a sizable plant. But it is easy. And if you have enough room, this is a good plant for buffer. This is a good plant for separation between roadways and objectionable sites, that sort of thing. So as far as the arborvitae goes, this is a crossbreed between two different types of arborvitae, one from Korea and one from the West Coast. They crossed naturally in a arboretum and developed a new plant. So this is widely used in our area today. Cedars are big trees. You can see this is a picture of a household in Marion. The plant on the right is quite a bit older than the one on the left. They liked the plant so much when the cedar on the right was going in that, 30 years later, they put in this second one. You can see that the foliage is sort of gray, blue, or even a little bit silver. Now we're going to show you a few cedars that are smaller and much more useful in the garden. This one is called Cedrus atlantica horseman. The German nursery developed this plant. It grows to about 10 to 12 to 15 feet tall and about the same in width. It's got an excellent blue, sometimes even turquoise blue. It is very easy, and you'll find that the Cedrus atlantica varieties do better here than the next one here, which is Cedrus deodar. This is a little bit different looking. The needles are a little bit longer. They don't appear in such nice starbursts, but this is a nice ground cover or just slightly larger plant for the garden. This one is called Feeling Blue. Next one here is Ginko, and you can see these are two extremes in Ginko form. One on the left, taken from a church in Forest City, shows a wide spreading tree with a big top growing to about 60 feet. In cemeteries, you'll see things that might be quite a bit older and twice that size. The one on the right is at the nursery. This is a fastigiate form like Princeton Century. There are several of these that are more or less just straight up and down and much more a completely different look to the tree. Now, this tree is maidenhair tree. It has bright yellow foliage in the fall. The leaves all drop as if on cue, and the ground around it will be just bright yellow. So it's a good tree. It's very strong, no pests and diseases at all with this tree, and a good, strong root system. This is used quite a bit for street tree planting in urban situations. This is a ginkgo at the National Arboretum, trained against the wall at the entrance to the bonsai area. You can see this has taken many, many years of tying against the wire form to create something that is extra special. And conifers, you'll see in some of these pictures, they are capable of being extra special plants when given a little bit of extra time to grow and some thoughtful pruning.
Okay, great, Bruce. I had a question about evergreens and conifers, and you've mentioned ginkgo and bald cypress. Can you once again just review why they're considered a conifer category?
Yes, ginkgo is not a conifer, but it is in the same general group of plants as conifers. Botanists have been confused as where to put it, and so ginkgo gets lumped in with the conifers. Bald cypress, on the other hand, is a true conifer with cones and has all the attributes of a conifer that you would expect. So the ginkgo is just sort of lumped in by general botanical nomenclature. And the second one is a true conifer, but it is deciduous. So you can't be confused that conifers can be evergreen and they can be deciduous. So that's why they call it a bald cypress, because it drops its leaves. So does that help?
Yes, it does. Great. Thank you.
The next group was pines, and I'm going to just show two pines. We'll get into our native pines later. Korean pine is not frequently seen, but this is a pine that is much like our own native white pine, eastern white pine. It's smaller. It grows to only 30 feet instead of 130. Compacta on the right here will only grow to less than 15 feet. So it's a very useful pine for smaller situations. The one on the left, Anna, is taller. That's going to be more like 30 feet in final size. And the other pine that does very well for us here is Bosnian pine from Europe. This variety is called Schmidtii, and the parent plant is now 100 and some years old, and it's still only 4 feet tall. So this is a plant that grows slowly. It's bright green. It doesn't skip a beat. Given a full sun situation and good drainage, this is an easy pine to work with. And so is any member of the Bosnian pine group. The next plant on our list is China fir. I think most of you have seen this before, and if you haven't, go drive through Montfort or some of the other older residential sections in Asheville, and you'll see China fir prominently displayed. It was very popular back in the 20s and again in the 50s. And now we're seeing another burst of popularity. The one on the right here is Samurai, a blue variety from Ralston Arboretum in Raleigh. This plant grows to about 35 feet, 40 feet, something like that. And so it's a little bit more useful. Regrettably, there are very few dwarf forms of Cunninghamia, and some of those come from Australia, New Zealand, and may or may not be hardy in the Asheville area. But Cunninghamia samurai is fully hardy. Juniper would be our next group, And I'm just going to show a few junipers that you may or may not be familiar with. These are two ground cover forms. On the left is Conferta silver mist, which is a form of Japanese shore juniper. And this is a blue variety. It's quite pleasing and looks good when spotted against dark green or bright yellow. It pops out a little bit more. Procumbens nana on the right, dwarf Japanese garden juniper, is a long used ground cover that will grow 5 to 8 feet across from one plant and very short, less than 6 inches tall. So it's a good ground cover given time. If you don't have time, you place them a little bit closer together. In an upright form example, this is Hollywood juniper in a variegated form. This is about 15 feet. The original plant for us also came from Ralston Arboretum. This is a plant that gets heavy bird overnight visits just for temporary nesting or whatever. But junipers also have weeping forms. They have upright forms. They have forms that move in the wind better than others, and they're worth keeping an eye on. But most people are bored with junipers. I'm just showing these as an example that there are some more exciting varieties around. Next group would be bald cypress. I'm sorry, the spelling on this slide is not correct. It's R-E-S-S. So bald cypress is one of the great southeastern trees. This plant goes from the East Coast all the way to the Mississippi River and up into Missouri. It is famous for having knees, which we still are not quite sure what they're for. They may be stabilization, or they may be some sort of a breathing ability. We just don't know. But it is an interesting feature. For that reason, bald cypress is not a lawn tree. It can be in a background. It's a big tree. Bald cypress grows to 90 to 110 slowly, but it's a beautiful tree. It is deciduous, as you can see in this picture. The leaves will turn rusty color this time of year and all drop off in concert. And it's a beautiful tree at any time of year, very strong looking tree. This is a form of bald cypress that is a weeping form. You can see the deciduous outline of the tree on the right and what it looks like, the same tree on the left in midsummer. So this is very useful, but you can see it's a little bit on the large size. This is a large size home, and this is a plant that needs a large spot. But it's a good weeper. And this is an exciting new introduction. Now we're going to cover the Alaskan cedars, which it doesn't make much sense that a tree from Alaska is going to do well in the American Southeast. But this has been trialed at many arboreta. The plant itself is 30 to 60 feet, but most of the garden forms are going to be on the order of 30 feet in final size. On the left is pendula, an upright grower with strongly weeping foliage from branches that are angled at 45 degrees or at 90 degrees from the trunk. Boyko sundown is a variegated form of the Alaskan cedar, a little bit more challenging, but still a very worthwhile plant to grow. The last one here, the slide is a little dark, but it's Vonderhacker. This is a form that is much more erect with foliage that drapes straight down the trunk. And this plant, given a wind, moves slowly back and forth. And as you see this plant pulsing like that, it is very much alive. It's very cool. Okay, Allison, it's time for the first question section. So if you have some people who have sent us in some questions, now's the time.
Okay, great, Bruce. We have a few questions. Is there an arborvitae that would be a smaller size for just a residential lawn for screening?
Emerald arborvitae is the common choice for that. It's also an easy grower, but it's much more subject to bagworm and a few other problems. That's why I didn't group it in with the best, because it has a little bit more of a tendency to be visited by insects and the like. So that grows to about 15 feet. There are a number of arborvitaes that are smaller. There are even some that are rounded in shape, some that are teardropped in shape, but they're going to be in the dwarf to miniature category. And some of them are dwarfed down to the point where they're under 2 feet for the entire lifespan of the plant.
Okay. While we're talking full sun, someone who I spoke to on the phone the other day has a very narrow full sun bed that they want to create a little planting in front of a privacy screen. It's 28 inches wide, the bed is, and they want something very upright. And we were talking about Juniper Blue Arrow, and I think you have a comment about that, and she's not been able to source it. So do you have a recommendation for a full sun?
Well, there's a reason she hasn't been able to source that plant. It's because it doesn't perform well in the southeast. Blue Point is a scopular type of juniper from the Rocky Mountains, and brought into our climate, it is plagued by various fungal organisms and doesn't last very long. So that is going to keep it off of my list for sure. There are a number of plants that she can put in that area, but I would suggest that they're not going to be junipers. They might be, say, a yew of narrow proportions. And then you think about using some of the things that are actual dwarf to miniatures. If you've got a strong background behind this narrow bed, you don't have room for much more.
Yeah.
If it's only 28 inches wide and you've already got a big background plant, you need to be thinking about confined spaces and confined shapes. So you're going to be wanting to look at the miniature group, which I really haven't highlighted too much in this talk, but they're there. And there's many varieties of miniature conifers that are going to be adaptable to her situation.
Okay.
But I would need to see the bed in order to make a recommendation.
Gotcha. Okay, I want to do one more and then we'll get back to your talk. Along the line of plants that don't do well in our area, is it true that generally ABs is just not happy in our area? Are there any of the ABs that would work here for us?
Okay, ABs or true firs are from higher elevations. We have one as a native plant here, Abs fraseri, which is up in Mount Mitchell and that area. Up above the elevation that a red spruce would occupy. So it's not that it's a plant that absolutely won't do well in our area, but Western forms need to be grafted upon a rootstock that is more tolerant of the Southeast's humidity and heat in the summertime. Most of these firs are from higher elevations, some of them 10,000 feet and more. So being able to grow that in a moist, humid environment in the Southeast is a little bit of a stretch for that plant. So we grafted onto a more durable understock, and we find that that plant is able to handle our area. As far as the Asheville area goes, the more elevation you have, the happier those firs are going to be. So if you are at 3,500 feet, you might be able to get by with having your plants grown in Oregon and grown on an understock that is not superior from the Southeast.
Well, we have some more questions, but let's get on with our talk and we'll make sure we catch all these before we conclude today. Thank you, Bruce.
Very good. We'll move on. Moving into the next category, which is sun or shade, the following four groups of plants excel in our area given either sun or shade. These are adaptable plants, so these would be Cryptomeria or Japanese cedar. We're seeing a lot of these now in our area. Picea orientalis or Oriental spruce. This is sort of a forgotten spruce, but it's the one that does the best in the Southeast. Chamaecyparis spicifera, or pea-bearing cypress, and its cousin Chamaecyparis obtusa and occidentalis are very hardy and perfectly usable here in our area, and very popular, all of them. As the first example of Cryptomeria, these are some upright growing forms. Gyokruya on the left is a Japanese form. Most of these plants will have been selected over the centuries by Japanese nurserymen, and some of the newer forms, like the one on the right, winter mint, is something that's more likely to be discovered on our continent. So winter mint is going to be 30 feet to 60 feet. It's a good sized plant, not as big as green giant, but it's a nice hedge plant, and alternated back and forth. These make a very nice hedge. And the plant in front, the yellow, is from the West Coast. That's Western Red Cedar. It's one of the parents of the green giant. These are two dwarf forms of Japanese cedar. Koshii on the right, that's in a 3-gallon container. This plant grows to about 18 inches tall and 24 inches wide, maybe 24 by 24. Dark green, very useful for smaller growing locations in shade, a good bit of shade. On the left-hand side is a plant that was shot in Holland. This is pretty close to the golden grail that we're looking for in new plants. This has a lot of surprise quality. That's a crest on the top, which is a genetic mutation of a bud that causes this wavy pattern. Then the plant can merge out of this wavy pattern, and you see it on the top right there, going back to being its normal dinger type of growth, where dinger is what the plant looks like on the bottom, crested dinger in the center, and now it's reverting back to dinger again on the top right. As far as the spruce group goes, we're all familiar with Norway spruce, and it does reasonably well in our area. We're pushing it. It's Norway spruce, not Italian spruce. This is a plant from high alpine and snow-covered regions. You know, our climate is shifting for the warmer. Norway spruce is going to be less and less seen in our landscapes, I would think, as time goes on. However, Picea orientalis, this is a spruce from Turkey and the Caucasus. These are two dwarfer forms. Biltmore Estate has a nice grove of Picea orientalis at about 90 feet. The species tree gets that big. But nanogracilis means dwarf graceful. This is a much smaller tree. This in the picture next to the Yucca rostrata there, that nanogracilis is probably about 10 to 12 feet now. Skylands on the right is a plant that you're seeing more of. This has got a delightful gold variegation to the top of the leaf. This plant will get to about 30 feet in time. This site was up at the top of the ridge all the way out near the parkway. This is a high elevation picture. Okay, Chamaecyparis piscifera, one of the first chamois we're going to talk about. This is a false cypress. These are two forms of garden useful conifers. The one on the right, curly tops, has a delightful little twist to the branchlet and a good blue color all year long. Hemisaura on the left is a very dwarf form. This one gets maybe to the size of a basketball, and that's it for its entire life. This is a very dwarf or even miniature plant. With its kissing cousin, Chamaecyparis obtusa, these are a couple of pictures that show the basic form. It's going to be an upright pyramid with layers of foliage. The foliage is shell-shaped and cupped and often shows variegation, particularly on the sunny side of the plant. So Lynn's ceramic there is about 10 feet tall now. You can top these and keep them at a shorter height should you so desire, but I've allowed this one to grow. On the right-hand side is Twin Towers, an all green form. Most of these obtusas are going to start off as cute little buns with a little bit of a rise in the center. In time, they are going to grow and open up a little bit. They'll drop some foliage and start to reveal their power of their trunk, which is a stringy bark, red-brown in color, very much an important feature of the plant. This is what you can do with it if you have plenty of time, courage, and patience. This is called a Hindu pan kind of treatment, where branches or collection of branches are worked into a palm. And this has taken many years to achieve. This plant was at Isley Nursery in Oregon, one of the nation's leading conifer producers. They do an excellent job, but they are out west. And when they bring their plants here, lots of times the plants will see fungi and climates that they're not accustomed to. So sometimes we'll lose plants from out west just as well. Allison, you have another round of questions for us?
Yeah, let's see. What about conifers and black walnuts? Are they tolerant of juglone?
Most of them are. You really almost have to experiment. Of course, there are lists that are available online. I would certainly consult one of those lists before planting any plant under black walnut. There are other trees that have the same type of a natural herbicide that is exuded by the roots, shoots, and all parts of the plant. So when a black walnut drops its nutshells, those juglans go into the ground as well. So you're really facing a battle to try and put something in a zone of a plant that is actively trying to discourage any woody plant from performing well in its root zone. Look at the lists.
Oh, great. There are some good ones out there. Someone made a comment about green ball Western red cedar and having a problem with those. Do they do well for us?
Okay, Western red cedar we looked at in a previous slide with winter mint. It was a smaller plant. Western red cedar or Thuja plicata grows on the coast, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, Northern California. It's an impressive plant on its own. I think the track record down here is variable. I've had some varieties that have lasted for many years and then all of a sudden will start to lose their top. This would be an upright pyramid. The ball type would be like pygmea. That's not so much a ball. I've got an older plant that is now maybe 3 feet tall by 3 feet wide, and it's still plunking along doing just fine. Again, if there's problems with these conifers, drainage is the first thing to look at. So it could be getting crowded by other plants. Conifers don't perform well when faced with competition. If you have a long-lived perennial growing close to the base of a conifer, that conifer is going to lose needles to that perennial because it is robbing the light and the air and the space that those needles need to stay fresh. So the conifer will drop those needles because they're no longer performing their function. They're not bringing in the energy that the tree needs, so they're discarded.
Okay, great. What kind of recommendation would you give somebody who's looking to put conifers in containers, like long-term containers on their deck?
Yeah, most of the conifers that we've looked at, with the exception of those that are going to grow too large, are going to be fully usable in containers on a porch or a deck or something like that. They can be bonsai, they can work into a trough garden, that sort of thing. They could be miniatures, but they really shouldn't be anything more than the dwarf category, which would probably be to 6 feet or so. Once the plant is starting to get big, you're going to need to transfer that plant into the landscape, or you're going to have to pick up that pair of pruners and keep it confined to the space that you need to.
Okay, great. Excellent. There was a general question about pruning and pest management and maintenance. And I noticed on the Conifer Society website, they've got some articles and some good information on caring for and selecting and designing with conifers. So let's go on with your talk and we can pick up questions the next time around.
Okay, very good. The last group we're going to do is deeper shade tolerant. We all know that shade can be anything from a few hours of shade in the morning to deep dark shade all day. Well, for deep dark shade all day, perhaps only the taxus that is listed here would perform, and even then that plant is going to be stressed. It's just, there are a few conifers that are really low light plants. However, these three are my votes for what you would use in the mountains here. Thuja or Elkhorn Cedar. Most people don't know this plant at all, but it's very, very easy, and you should be seeing much more of this. It's very popular in the Atlanta area, but as far as cold hardiness, it does fine here. Some of the varieties even to 3,500 feet. Cephalotaxus or Plum Yew. These are Oriental plants or plants from China, Japan, Korea, and then some from Australia, New Zealand, and that area. Cephalotaxus is different from most conifers in that the cones are going to look like little plums when completely developed. They're erect, they're purple, but this is a highly modified cone, and it still qualifies it as being a conifer. And then true yews, taxus, these are used all the way from northern New England, all the way down the East Coast and on the West Coast as well. They also perform well in Michigan and the upper Midwest, but they are subject to deer predation, and that's the problem, especially in Connecticut through Pennsylvania and that area right now. Their yews are being decimated by the deer population. It may be a problem for you on your site. That's a site-dependent problem, whether or not you have deer. This is the Elkhorn Cedar. Latifolia is this name. This is a plant that's basically 5 by 5. And if you turn the underside of the leaf up, you'll see a bright white pattern of their stomatal markings showing the breathing pores of the leaves on the backside, the needles on the backside. So when this plant moves in the wind, you get a tricolor effect, a green, white, and maybe some yellow or gold to it. And these are two smaller varieties that are quickly becoming popular. Burcastle on the right is a very small plant, maybe 1.5 feet in final size and about 2 feet wide. Solar flare is a little bit difficult to grow, but it sure is a striking plant. The color is excellent. It's slow to develop. It was found by an English nursery about 10 years ago, and it's slowly making its way into popularity. Cephalotaxus, this is one example. Korean gold. This is a plant that is upright with new growth coming out, bright yellow to gold. And this is a older tree in the picture, dwarfing the cat to be sure, but it's a little bit fat at the top and tapers towards the bottom. So the opposite of being a narrow, upright pyramid. This is pyramid going in reverse. This is a fanciful type of conifer. This is a weeping sequoia. Now, we can't grow that one here. It's a weeping variety of the California big tree, like General Sherman, where you can drive through the tree, same tree, but this is a weeping form that was discovered by seedling variants. They found some pendulous versions. Talk about a plant that will move in the wind. This plant is great. So we call this one the Minotaur, but this garden has lots of weeping forms. If you're into scaring children at Halloween, this is a good choice. This is the last slide in the first presentation. So this is a double rainbow at the nursery, showing that no matter what they throw at us, rainbows are around the corner. So may your garden experience many rainbows. This is the end of the first session. Allison, do you have some more questions on this part?
I do, actually. There was a question about Japanese black pine for our area. Does it take a snow load?
Japanese black pine, especially say the variety Thunderhead, tends to grow to be a 20 by 20 foot individual. If you don't keep some of those lower branches pruned back a little bit, it will not support a snow load very well. It won't necessarily break up, but it will bend down, and you'll wish you had pruned this back a little bit more to a compact shape once a heavy, wet snow strikes. That's an interesting point. When such a snow does arrive at your conifer garden, it does help to go out with a broom and sweep some of the excess weight off, because otherwise your plants are going to be deformed just for a while. They'll grow back to being what you remember, but they're going to go through an awkward phase for a while and recovering from that weight. Japanese black pine is one that would show that more than most.
Would you recommend the broom when you have bears in the garden? There was a question in the chat box about bear damage.
Well, I've seen bear damage certainly on Cedars. Green giants have seemed to be subject to bear damage. They seem to want to climb these trees rather than just rub their antlers in them like a deer would. Now, Alaskan cedar is another one that we'll see bear damage in. It really depends on whether bears frequent your property. So that does need to be taken into consideration if you have that problem.
We had an interesting question, what your opinion is about growing Torreya taxifolia and Thuja occidentalis in Western North Carolina.
Okay, Torreya is stinking cedar from northern Florida, a almost extinct in the wild plant at this point. If you're lucky enough to get your hands on one, you can put it in the ground. It needs plenty of air and light. Keep it away from other plants. It may succumb to the natural fungus that is plaguing the population in general. The Atlanta Botanic Gardens is involved in trying to rescue the population of native Torreya before it disappears. So here's an opportunity for you to be able to grow, display an almost extinct plant, but it will test your abilities as a grower. So not all conifers are going to be for the new gardener. The easier ones we've talked about, Juniper being perhaps the easiest. So if you're looking for a place to start, start easy.
Okay. And the other was Thuja.
Well, Thuja occidentalis, the Native American Arborvitae, that's probably native through certainly Virginia, but getting to North Carolina, it's probably no longer part of its native range, but it does very well here. By and large, most of the Arborvitaes are going to perform just fine. You do have to watch out for bagworm, which look like little cones, but if a portion of your conifer is defoliating rapidly while you're watching these cones appear, that's bagworm, and it will appear in the end of May. So a conifer pest to beware of.
How do you treat for them? That was a question earlier.
Okay, the simplest non-toxic way to do it is to simply collect the bags and put them in a trash can, or in the old days, it would have been a jar of kerosene or something like that. Well, there's going to be some chemicals that can be put down. You can use BT, so beneficial bacteria that are going to kill the caterpillars as they feed.
Okay. Early in the season.
Earlier in the season, right? You have to strike earlier. So early as being April.
Okay, let's continue. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. So the second section is going to be on brooming. And the first question is, what is a broom? Well, a broom is, just as we saw a picture with the crested dinger from a bud mutation, a broom is a growth on a tree, usually rounded, dense. It may be the entire top of the tree. It can occur on most of the native plants. The one on the left here with this proud group of harvesters, this is a hemlock that was in Ellijay, Georgia. And in the end, it resulted with the propagation of a new variety called Ellijay, which is very short, compact, and with a particularly nice curl to the needles. What causes this? Well, we don't really know. If it was the wider group of plants, mistletoe will cause brooming, but not in conifer. Viruses will cause brooming, but they don't last very long. What in conifers we're interested in is something that is going to last for a long time and be a new genetic package. So here's what a few brooms look like. The one on the left is a hemlock. The one on the right is a shortleaf pine. Here's a broom on a white pine on the left. The entire top of the tree is blown out in this V-shaped growth. And sometimes you can see these too. The one on the right is a pine from Nevada. And this one is like a vertical giant beehive. So these are two pines from the southeast, and this is what we're looking for. These are obvious, very different growth patterns in a tree. And what we want to do is sample these. What we're trying to do is to sample as many brooms as possible in hopes of getting new varieties to come along that will do just as good as the loblolly pine that they came from, or from the Virginia pine. Pines are tough. They're everywhere because they've done a good job of spreading themselves on all the continents of the earth. And we want to look at the genetic packages that we've got here to see if we can come up with something different, something that's going to be unusual, something we haven't ever seen before. So we're looking to make this package survive. What we have to do is sample this and graft it onto a suitable understock. So this is done at the nursery. We bring the plant back, we section it up, get the best pieces only, and then graft them onto a series of at least 3 different understocks to try and see whether we can get a good match. If we can get that first generation to succeed, we have a chance. But in reality, only about half of the brooms that we work with are successful in reproducing themselves, even with the help of grafting. Here we are, the harvesting. This is done in Michigan this time, and this is Picea mariana. So the pole pruner on the left is being used to remove a section of this, and here it is with my broomer, Scott. And that's the entire broom. That's going to be distributed among, in this case, it was about 6 different grafters. Hopefully, at least one of these grafters is going to be successful in being able to reproduce this broom. Here we are in South Carolina with Scott doing the honors with the pole pruner. This pruner, it's not telescoping, it's got sectional handles that are assembled one after another. So you get it up to 10 feet, put another 6 feet of pole on, up to 16 feet, put another pole up to 22 feet. And soon you get up to your broom. If it's under 50 feet, we can handle that. If it's over 50 feet, that's beyond our abilities to harvest. This is the business end of the pole pruner, a very sharp, very powerful cutting device that is going to be able to cut through a little bit more than an inch in diameter and hopefully be able to drop you a few pieces. So you get your pole up to the broom and then you feel around in the broom and try and hook the hook onto a branch and then pull the rope, and hopefully broom pieces come flying down, and you collect them, bag them, label them, and take them back to the nursery for the grafting phase. This is what grafts look like when they're in the bed and they're just healing. This grafts consist of an understock, which is going to be responsible for the root system, and the scion piece, which is the piece that's coming from the broom that you can see attached at the point of these rubber bands. So you really make a flap in the understock. You make a little cut in the scion piece that's going to slip into that flap just so. Then you tie it up with this rubber band. That's done in January, February, and by April, May, you'll know whether you have had success with your grafts. To show what we're up against, the first column on the left is the cultivar of several Virginia pines that we've been working with. These names, we don't like to go by numbers. It really doesn't give you much feeling for the broom at all. So we'll put a name on them either based on where they came from or how they appear. So Bow Broom was a broom that was found at a Bojangles. But the next column says percent success of the first generation. That is, if you take the broom wood itself, graft that, only 30% of bow brooms are going to work. You see the percentages down below are basically abysmal. 10%, 15%, 11%. That means only one of your grafts out of 10 is working. And that's not going to get it. You're not going to be able to produce and distribute eventually a broom that is only producing in that level of success. But look what happens on the column on the right. When I grow this first generation plant out into a 1 gallon and then a 3 gallon, and then I take some cuttings from this second generation, the second generation cuttings, look at the percentages that they're working at, 60 to 85 to 100%. So this is what we're after, is getting a plant that is going to survive on root stocks that are going to be useful in the Southeast. And we're looking to put it on, say, shortleaf pine, which has a tremendous range throughout the Southeast. And thus the plant is very adaptable to a large number of geographical settings. These are plants growing out. These are some of the Virginia pine brooms. Bow broom on the right here is the shortest broom we've found out of 30-some Virginias that we've been working with. And I think we've done 70 brooms so far, and about half of them have successfully produced the next generation. So bow broom is particularly enticing in that the needles are small, the plant is small. This is going to be a dwarf garden plant, dwarf but not miniature. Okay, now I'm going to go through a couple of stories about what it takes to get a broom. To find a broom, you have to scout. There's maybe one broom in every 10,000 trees, something like that, maybe even more like 15,000 trees. You're going to have to look at a lot of trees before you can find a broom. But when you do, getting it isn't always a piece of cake. You can see this thing is growing on a nearly vertical incline. This is Table Mountain pine, and this was growing near the parkway, but off their right of way. And it was in the eastern part of the parkway, so it got the name Downton Park. This is on the right a third-year growing plant of Downton Park. You can see the buds are particularly elongated. They're really quite different from any other pine you'll see. This makes it a delightful, smaller dwarf to intermediate size plant. Table Mountain pine has been circulated to several different growers now. You can get this out on the West Coast or from us. This one is starting to make the rounds. It's the only cultivar of Table Mountain pine there is so far, except for some color variety. Loblolly pine, this is a plant called Polkville Bank. Polkville is the neighboring town next to where the nursery is located. And this one is growing in a loblolly or Pinus tata. And you can see on the right, you can barely see it, but that tip of that pole is right at the broom. On the left here, we've cleaned it out a little bit. We always try and clean up the brooms as we take some wood from them, try and knock out some of the older needles and give them a little more air and light so that they'll be there the next time should we need to come back and resample. Here's Scott again with Polkville Bank as a sample. You can see how big these pieces are, and you're only going to take just the bud and maybe 2 or 3 inches of stem, and that's going to be your entire scion piece to mount onto your graft. This is what Polkville Bank looks like on the right, and this is very possibly a very nice plant. It's going to take 10 years to evaluate brooms to see whether you've got something that's really new, really different and exciting, and whether it's going to work in the marketplace. But Polkville Bank looks like okay. And here's another type. This is Pinus glabra. This is spruce pine. We drove all the way to Athens, Georgia, picked up a PhD, Dr. John Reuter, who's an eminent horticulturist. He's a teaching PhD at the University of Georgia. So he knew about these 2 trees that were almost at the Florida state line. So we picked him up and drove down there. 8 hours later, we get to pull around the corner to find these 2 holes where the remains of the Pinus glabra that had the broom in it had been chipped. They had been hit by lightning, and our entire trip was for naught that day. We did find a couple of others coming back home, but when you go all the way on a plant expedition all day long and get to see your quarry looking like this is just what plant exploration is like. The tales of plant explorers are full of such stories. And this is just the final shot of where we are. We're fairly easy to find once you get on Route 226 from Marion. You'll go south about 20 minutes and you'll come to a blinker light in the middle of nowhere. Turn left at that point, and 2 miles, there we are. We hope you'll be inspired about what I've talked about in conifers, and keep your eyes open on native trees looking for brooms. It's all exciting. It's all new, and you can participate if you so desire. Thank you very much.
Everyone is just very grateful for your time and your presentation. Thank you so much for what you presented to us today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we hope you have a good day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you all.